Haarlem, Netherlands. A public park bench. September 17th, 1943. 2:48 in the afternoon. The sun filters through oak trees. Mothers push prams along gravel paths. Children chase pigeons near a fountain. German soldiers patrol the perimeter, rifles slung over grey-green uniforms. No one notices the girl approaching on the bicycle. She looks 12 years old. Braided pigtails, blonde hair catching the light, a simple cotton dress, worn but clean, knee-high socks, scuffed leather shoes. The bicycle is old, rusted handlebars, a wicker basket hanging from the front. She leans the bicycle against a nearby tree, adjusts her coat, walks toward a woman sitting alone on the bench. The woman is reading a newspaper, mid-40s, dark hair pulled into a severe bun, wire-rimmed glasses, a leather handbag rests beside her on the bench. The girl stops, smiles, innocent, harmless. "Excuse me," the girl says, her voice is soft, polite. "What's your name?" The woman looks up from her newspaper, annoyed at first, then her expression softens, just a child asking a question. "Martha Voss," the woman says. The girl's smile disappears. She reaches into her coat pocket. Her hand emerges holding a small pistol. Walther PPK. Black metal. Compact. Deadly. She looks the woman directly in the eyes and fires. The gunshot cracks across the park. Sharp, final. Martha Voss collapses, dead before she hits the ground. Blood spreads across the front of her blouse. The newspaper falls from her hands. Pages scatter in the breeze. The girl doesn't run. She calmly places the pistol back in her coat pocket, walks to her bicycle, gets on, begins to pedal. She rides past a German soldier standing 20 feet away. He's lighting a cigarette, doesn't even look at her. She rides past 2 Dutch policemen. They're talking, laughing about something. They don't stop her. She rides past crowds of civilians gathering near the bench, people shouting, pointing, chaos spreading like wildfire. No one suspects her. No one stops her. Her name is Liesl Vaughan. She's 17 years old. The woman she just killed was compiling lists for the Gestapo. Names, addresses, every Jewish family hiding in the Haarlem region. That list would have meant death for 200 innocent people. Children torn from their parents' arms. Families loaded onto cattle cars. Mass graves in Poland. Liesl had just saved them all. By the end of the war, she and her sister Maren would assassinate dozens of Nazis and collaborators. The exact number no one knows. When asked, Liesl always gave the same answer. One should not ask a soldier any of that. This is the story of 2 teenage girls who seduced Nazi officers, lured them into the forest, and shot them dead. Girls who learned to kill in an underground potato shed. Girls who refused to murder children, even the children of their enemies. Girls who cried after every assassination, yet never stopped pulling the trigger. 3 years earlier, the Netherlands, May 10th, 1940. 4:30 in the morning, German bombers crossed the Dutch border. Operation Fall Gelb had begun. The sound came first, a low rumble that shook windows. Then the explosions, orange flashes lighting up the pre-dawn sky, the smell of burning oil, smoke rising in thick black columns. Liesl Vaughan woke to her mother shaking her shoulder. "Get dressed," Vivian Vaughan said. "Quickly." Liesl was 14 years old, small for her age, blonde hair that her mother braided every morning. She shared a bed with her older sister Maren, 16, who was already pulling on her shoes. Their apartment was tiny, 3 rooms in a converted warehouse building, cracked plaster walls, a single window overlooking the street. They lived in the poorest section of Haarlem, where factory workers and day laborers crowded into buildings that should have been condemned decades ago. "What's happening?" Liesl asked. "The Germans," Vivian said. "They're invading." The Dutch army mobilized, 10 divisions, 270,000 men, outdated rifles, almost no tanks, no chance. The German Wehrmacht had 135 divisions, 2,600 tanks, 3,700 aircraft. The Luftwaffe controlled the skies within hours. Rotterdam burned. The Dutch command center received an ultimatum: surrender or every major city would be leveled. Queen Wilhelmina fled to England on a British destroyer. On May 15th, after 5 days of fighting, the Netherlands surrendered. German occupation began immediately. Liesl stood at the apartment window, watched German soldiers march down the street, perfect formation, boots striking cobblestones in unison. The sound echoed off buildings, rhythmic, relentless, inevitable. Swastika flags hung from lampposts, red banners with black symbols that made her stomach turn. "Don't stare," Vivian said. She pulled Liesl away from the window. "Don't give them a reason to notice you." Vivian Vaughan was 42 years old, thin, tired eyes, calloused hands from years of factory work. She'd raised 2 daughters alone after her husband died when Liesl was 3. Heart attack, no warning. One day he was there, the next he was gone. Vivian had turned to politics, joined the Communist Party, not because she believed in Soviet ideology, but because they were the only ones talking about helping the poor, the hungry, the forgotten. She didn't just talk about helping people, she did it. Within weeks of the occupation, their apartment became a safe house, Jewish refugees fleeing Germany, political fugitives running from the Nazis, strangers who needed a place to hide. Liesl and Maren grew up sharing their beds with people whose names they sometimes didn't even know. They slept on mattresses stuffed with straw. They had almost nothing, but their mother still made room for others. Vivian taught them one lesson above all. "If you have to help somebody," she said, "you have to make sacrifices for yourself." It was a lesson they would never forget. The occupation tightened its grip week by week. German soldiers filled the streets. Nazi flags hung from every government building. Dutch police took orders from German officers. Collaborators emerged from the shadows. Neighbors who turned in neighbors. Citizens who compiled lists for the Gestapo. Arthur Seyss-Inquart became Reichskommissar of the Netherlands. He immediately issued new laws. Jews had to register, then wear yellow stars, then surrender their businesses, then move to designated neighborhoods. Liesl remembered what it felt like. "I remember how people were taken from their homes," she would say, decades later. "The Germans were banging on doors with the butts of their rifles. That made so much noise you'd hear it in the entire neighborhood. And they would always yell. It was very frightening." But the Vaughan family didn't hide. They fought back. Liesl and Maren joined their mother distributing anti-Nazi pamphlets and illegal newspapers. At night, they'd sneak through the streets with paste and paper, covering German propaganda posters with their own messages. "The Netherlands must be free. Don't go to Germany." For every Dutch man working in Germany, a German soldier goes to the front. Then they'd race away on their bicycles, hearts pounding, knowing that if they were caught they'd be shot, but they were never caught. 2 young girls on bicycles, who would suspect them? Spring 1941, a man knocked on their door. Vivian answered. The man was tall, early 40s, greying hair, wearing a worker's coat and cap. He looked like 100 other men in Haarlem. Forgettable, ordinary. His name was Thaddeus Grayson, commander of the Haarlem Council of Resistance, part of the underground network fighting the Nazi occupation. He'd heard about the Vaughan family, the mother who hid refugees, the daughters who distributed illegal pamphlets. He wanted to recruit them. "Can your daughters join the resistance?" he asked Vivian. Liesl was 14, Maren was 16. Their mother said yes, the girls said yes, but Grayson wasn't convinced yet. He needed to know if they could be trusted, if they would break under pressure. So he tested them. A few days later, he returned to their apartment, this time dressed as a Gestapo officer, SS uniform, Luger pistol holstered at his hip. black leather coat, death's head insignia on his cap. He burst through the door, no warning, no knock, waving the gun, screaming in German, "Wo ist er? Where is he?" Vivian stepped back, hands raised, terror in her eyes. Liesel and Maren froze. "Wo ist der Jude? Where is the Jew?" He grabbed Maren by the arm, shook her, the Luger pointed at her face. "You're hiding him. Tell me where he is." Liesel's heart hammered. Her vision tunneled. This was it. They were going to die. But something inside her snapped. She didn't give up a name. Instead, she kicked the man in the shin hard. Maren twisted free, punched him in the stomach. They fought back, kicking, hitting, screaming, refusing to betray anyone, even if it meant their own deaths. Grayson stopped, stepped back, lowered the gun, removed the cap. "You passed," he said. Liesel stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched, tears streaming down her face. "What?" she said. "You passed the test," Grayson said. He wasn't smiling. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "You didn't break. You didn't give up a name. You fought back." Vivian leaned against the wall, relief flooding through her. Grayson looked at the two girls. "This is what joining the resistance actually means," he said. "You'll learn to sabotage bridges and railway lines." He paused. "And you'll learn to shoot Nazis." Maren looked at her little sister. Liesel grinned. "Well," she said, "that's something I've never done before." Their mother gave them one piece of advice before they left. "Always stay human," Vivian said. They were taken to an underground potato shed in the countryside outside Haarlem. There, in the darkness beneath the earth, they learned to fire a weapon. The instructor was a resistance fighter named Jan Keller, former Dutch army sergeant who had gone underground after the surrender. Stocky build, scarred hands, eyes that had seen too much. He handed Liesel a Walther PPK pistol, 7-round magazine, 8mm caliber, compact enough to hide in a coat pocket. "Hold it like this," Keller said. "Two hands, steady grip, don't jerk the trigger, squeeze slowly." They fired at targets made from potato sacks stuffed with dirt. The sound of gunfire echoed in the confined space. The smell of cordite filled the air, sulfur and smoke. Liesel's first shot went wide. Her second hit the edge of the target. By her 10th shot, she was hitting center mass consistently. Keller taught them more than just marksmanship. He taught them to stay calm, to breathe, to think clearly when adrenaline floods your system. He taught them how to conceal a weapon, how to approach a target without raising suspicion, how to fire and disappear. "You're not soldiers," Keller told them. "You're ghosts. You strike and vanish." They practiced for weeks, in potato sheds, in abandoned barns, in forests far from German patrols. By the time their training ended, Liesel could hit a man-sized target at 20 yards. Maren could field strip and reassemble a pistol blindfolded. They were ready. Their first mission wasn't assassination, it was arson. Nazi warehouses in Haarlem stored supplies for Wehrmacht units stationed in the Netherlands. Food, ammunition, vehicle parts. The resistance wanted them burned, but the warehouses were guarded by SS soldiers, armed, alert, impossible to approach without being seen. The plan was simple. Liesel and Maren would approach the guards, talk to them, flirt with them, distract them with smiles and laughter while the rest of the resistance slipped in from behind and set the fires. It worked perfectly. Liesel walked up to the first guard, a young German soldier barely older than her. 19, maybe 20, blonde hair, blue eyes, homesick expression. She smiled. "Where are you from?" she asked in broken German. The guard looked surprised, then pleased. A pretty girl was talking to him. "Bavaria," he said, "near Munich." "Do you miss home?" "Every day." "Do you like the Netherlands?" He shrugged. It's wet and cold, not like home. They talked. Liesel asked about his family, his girlfriend back in Germany, his favorite foods. The guard relaxed, started talking, told her about his hometown, his mother's cooking, how much he hated the army. Meanwhile, resistance fighters climbed over the fence behind him, entered the warehouse, spread gasoline across wooden crates, lit matches. Flames erupted, the warehouse exploded in fire. Orange light illuminated the night sky. The guard spun around, shocked. By the time he realized what had happened, Liesel and Maren were already cycling away. The warehouses burned through the night, 3 buildings reduced to ash. Thaddeus Grayson saw what they were capable of. These girls could go places men couldn't. They could get close to targets no one else could reach. Their youth and innocence were weapons more powerful than any gun. It was time for them to learn what that really meant. September 1943. The resistance received intelligence. A Dutch woman named Martha Vos was compiling lists for the Gestapo. Names, addresses, every Jew hiding in the Haarlem region. She worked as a secretary in a government office. She had access to registration records, birth certificates, housing documents. She was planning to hand the lists to the Germans within days. That list was a death sentence for hundreds of people, men, women, children, entire families who would be rounded up, deported, murdered. The Resistance Council met. They debated. Some argued they should steal the lists. Others said they should threaten her, make her stop. Grayson shook his head. "Threats won't work," he said. "She's a true believer. She thinks she's doing the right thing. There's only one solution." He looked at Liesel. "Can you do it?" Liesel was 17 years old. She'd practiced shooting targets in potato sheds. She'd never killed a human being. She'd never looked someone in the eyes and pulled the trigger. She said yes. September 17th, 1943. Liesel rode her bicycle to the public park where Martha Vos would be that afternoon. She wore a simple dress, braided pigtails, a coat with deep pockets. Inside one pocket, a Walther PPK pistol, 7 rounds, safety off. She found her target sitting on a bench reading a newspaper. Liesel approached, casual, innocent, just a girl with braided hair. She asked, "What's your name?" The woman told her. Liesel confirmed she had the right target. She pulled out her pistol, looked the woman in the eyes, and shot her. The woman fell, dead before she hit the ground. Liesel got on her bicycle and rode away. Past German soldiers, past Dutch police, past crowds of civilians. No one suspected her. No one stopped her. She pedaled through the streets of Haarlem, turned into an alley, stopped, and vomited. Later, she would describe what happened next. "I had to throw up. I felt terrible. I couldn't eat for days, but I also knew that if I hadn't done it, hundreds of people would have died." Maren asked her, "Do you regret it?" Liesel shook her head. "No," she said, "but I will never forget her face." Years later, when asked how she coped with killing people, Liesel gave a simple answer. "We never got used to it. We cried every time. But we kept doing it because someone had to." The resistance began assigning the sisters more missions, not just women, not just collaborators, German soldiers, SS officers, Gestapo agents. Their method was always the same. Liesel or Maren would approach a target in public, a cafe, a park, a street corner. They'd smile, flirt, act innocent, ask the soldier to walk with them, show them something, help them with directions. The soldier would follow. They'd lead him to a quiet place, a forest, an abandoned building, a secluded alley. Other resistance fighters would be waiting. Sometimes Liesel pulled the trigger herself. Sometimes it was Maren. Sometimes it was another resistance member. But the sisters were always there, always part of the operation. German intelligence noticed. They compiled their own lists. descriptions of suspects, witnesses reported seeing two young women near assassination sites, one with dark braids, one with lighter hair. The SS issued bulletins: search for the girl with the braided hair, search for the girl with the bicycle. But they never found them. Because Liesl Vaughan and Maren Vaughan looked like every other teenage girl in the Netherlands. Ordinary, forgettable, invisible. And that made them the most dangerous weapons the resistance had. By the fall of 1943, the sisters had killed 8 targets: German soldiers, Dutch collaborators, traitors who served the Reich. The war had just begun, and they were just getting started. Fall 1943. The resistance expanded operations. Not just collaborators anymore, not just secretaries compiling lists. German soldiers, SS officers, Gestapo agents, men with blood on their hands, men responsible for thousands of deaths, men who thought they were untouchable. The operations followed a pattern. October, a cafe. Maren smiles at an SS lieutenant, suggests a walk to see an old mill, leads him through narrow streets. He follows, relaxed, thinking about what might happen when they're alone. They never reach the mill. 2 resistance fighters step from the shadows. 3 shots. The lieutenant falls. Maren is already cycling away. November, a street corner. Liesl asks a Gestapo agent for directions. "I'm lost," she says. "Could you walk with me?" He agrees. She leads him into the old district, down an alley between shuttered shops. A single gunshot echoes off brick walls. She vanishes before anyone investigates. December, a restaurant. A German supply officer dines alone. A young woman with striking features approaches. They talk. She laughs at his stories. An hour later, in his apartment, he dies with a bullet in his chest. The woman is gone before his body grows cold. Seduce, lure, kill. The method never changed, and it never failed. German intelligence compiled reports, witness descriptions, patterns. 2 young women, possibly 3, age 15 to 25, Dutch appearance, often seen with bicycles, present near multiple assassination sites. The SS issued bulletins throughout the occupied territories. Wanted, the girl with the braided hair. Wanted, the girl with the bicycle. Rewards were offered, 1,000 guilders for information leading to arrest. But no one came forward because Liesl and Maren looked like 100 other girls in Haarlem, 1,000 other girls in the Netherlands. Their ordinariness was their greatest weapon. They blended into crowds, vanished into everyday life. 2, became invisible the moment they wanted to be. German soldiers passed them on the street without a second glance. Dutch police waved them through checkpoints. Collaborators never suspected that the smiling teenager asking for directions was the same girl who'd killed 3 of their colleagues. The sisters changed their appearance constantly. Different hairstyles, different clothes, fake names at checkpoints. One week Liesl wore her hair down, the next week in a bun. Sometimes she darkened it with coal dust. Sometimes she wore glasses with plain lenses. Maren did the same. Long hair, short hair, scarves covering her head, workers' overalls instead of dresses. They became whoever they needed to be. Ghosts don't get caught. And the Vaughan sisters were very good at being ghosts. Winter 1943. A new fighter joined the resistance. Her name was Rosalind Ashford. Everyone called her Roz, 20 years old, law student at the university before the occupation, studied in Amsterdam, wanted to be a lawyer, defend the innocent, fight for justice in courtrooms. Then the Nazis came. Her 2 best friends were daughters of union leaders, Sophia Brennan, Helen Porter, both targeted by the Gestapo for their father's resistance activities. Sophia was arrested in November 1942, sent to a labor camp in Germany. Letters stopped coming after 3 months. Her family never saw her again. Helen went into hiding, lived in attics and basements for 18 months, moved from safe house to safe house, never staying more than a week, always one step ahead of the Gestapo until she wasn't. They caught her trying to flee to England, crossing into Belgium on foot. A German patrol found her in the woods near the border. They shot her on sight. Roz couldn't stand by and do nothing. She started as a courier, delivering messages between resistance cells, coded letters hidden in her textbooks, moving through the city like any other student. Messages became weapons. She smuggled pistols in false-bottom handbags, grenades wrapped in newspaper. Weapons became sabotage. She helped blow up railway bridges, cut telephone lines, destroyed German supply depots. Sabotage became something darker. January 1944. Roz met Thaddeus Grayson at a safe house in Utrecht, a basement room lit by a single candle, the smell of damp stone and mildew. "Can you shoot?" Grayson asked. "Yes," Roz said. He introduced her to Liesel and Maren. 3 women stood in the flickering candlelight. Liesel was 17 now, still looked younger, still wore her hair in braids when the mission required it. Maren was 19, serious eyes, hands that never stopped moving, artist's hands, killer's hands. Roz was 20, red hair, natural, the color of autumn leaves catching fire, impossible to forget. "Your hair," Grayson said. "It's memorable." "I know," Roz said. That makes you a target." "I know that too." Grayson studied her for a moment, then nodded. "There's a German captain in Utrecht," he said. "Supply officer. Organizes train shipments of stolen goods, food confiscated from Dutch families, art looted from museums, money taken from Jews before they're deported." He placed a photograph on the table. Werner Schultz, mid-30s, Iron Cross on his uniform, self-satisfied smile. "He eats alone at the same restaurant every Thursday night," Grayson said. "Steak while children starve outside." Roz looked at the photograph. "I'll take care of it," she said. February 12th, 1944, Utrecht. Roz found Captain Schultz at his usual table, cutting into a thick steak, a bottle of French wine, stolen, no doubt. She approached. "Excuse me," she said in German. "Do you have a light?" Schultz looked up, saw the red-haired girl, smiled. "Of course." He lit her cigarette. She sat down without being invited. They talked for an hour. She laughed at his stories about requisitioning supplies, pretended to be impressed when he showed her his Iron Cross, said she'd always admired military men. He paid the bill. Suggested they continue the conversation at his apartment. She agreed. They walked 3 blocks. He unlocked the door, stepped inside first, turned to invite her in. She pulled a pistol from her handbag, shot him twice in the chest, left through the back entrance, disappeared into the winter night. But witnesses had seen her, the restaurant staff, other diners, people on the street, the red hair. Impossible to forget, impossible to miss. Within days, SS bulletins circulated throughout the occupied Netherlands. Wanted, the girl with the red hair, age approximately 20, Dutch, extremely dangerous. Approach with caution. Roz dyed her hair black that same night, started wearing glasses, changed her style of dress from student to working class. But she didn't stop fighting. The hair could change, the mission couldn't. December 1944. The resistance planned their most ambitious operation yet. Hauptsturmführer Karl Hoffmann, SS officer, head of enforcement for the Haarlem region, known throughout the Netherlands as the Axe. Not because he used one, but because of how he dealt with resistance members. Swift, brutal, final. One strike and you were gone. Responsible for the deportation of over 1,000 Dutch Jews. Personally oversaw interrogations in the Gestapo headquarters basement, torture sessions that lasted days, executions carried out in the Overveen dunes. The resistance had tried to kill him twice before. Both attempts failed. Hoffman was careful, paranoid. He traveled with bodyguards, varied his routes, trusted no one. Getting close to him would be nearly impossible for a man. Liesl spent 3 weeks studying Hoffman's routine. She learned he ate lunch at Café Leopold near the train station every Tuesday and Thursday, 2:15 in the afternoon. He always sat at the same table by the window. The bodyguard waited outside. Wednesday mornings he drank coffee at the same cafe, reading reports, making notes in the margins with a fountain pen. Sunday evenings he walked his dog, a German shepherd, well trained like its owner, through the park near his quarters. The bodyguard followed 20 paces behind. Liesl chose Thursday lunch. December 2nd, 1944, 2:15 in the afternoon. She entered Café Leopold carrying a university textbook, mathematics, borrowed from a resistance member who'd been a professor before the occupation. She ordered tea, sat at a table near Hoffman's, opened the book, pretended to study. The cafe was warm, smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke. A radio played German music. Propaganda station. 10 minutes passed. Liesl stood, gathered her things. The book slipped from her hands, landed near Hoffman's feet with a heavy thud. He looked down, then at her, picked up the book, handed it to her. Danke, Liesl said in German. Thank you. Bitte, Hoffman replied. You're welcome. His eyes lingered on her face, not suspicious, just a man noticing a pretty girl. Do you come here often? Liesl asked. Hoffman smiled. Most days. It's a nice cafe. The best in Harlem. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Would you like to sit? Liesl hesitated. Perfect hesitation, the right amount of shyness mixed with interest. Just for a moment, she said. She sat. They talked about nothing important. The weather, how cold it was this winter, whether spring would come early. Hoffman relaxed, his shoulders loosened, his voice softened. He saw what Liesl wanted him to see. A student, a girl, lonely, harmless, perhaps interested in him. He didn't see the weapon she carried, didn't see the hate burning behind her smile, didn't see the ghost sitting across from him. 20 minutes later, Liesl suggested they take a walk. I know a beautiful park nearby, she said. Very peaceful, good for clearing the mind. Hoffman agreed immediately. They left the cafe together. The bodyguard fell into step behind them, standard protocol. Close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give the officer privacy. Liesl led Hoffman through narrow streets, away from the main roads, toward the residential neighborhood on the eastern edge of the city. They walked, talked. Hoffman told her about Germany, how beautiful Bavaria was before the war, the mountains, the forests, how he missed his hometown. Liesl listened, nodded, asked questions, led him deeper into the quiet streets. They never reached the park. 2 resistance fighters emerged from an alley, Jan Keller, the man who'd trained Liesl to shoot, and Willem Bonekamp, a docker who'd joined the resistance after the Germans killed his brother. Keller fired first, hit Hoffman in the chest. The SS officer staggered backward, reached for his pistol. Bonekamp fired, hit him in the throat. The bodyguard spun around, drew his weapon. Too slow, Keller put 3 bullets in him. Center mass. The bodyguard fell beside his commander. Liesl was already running, through back alleys, over fences, into a basement 3 streets away, where she'd hidden a change of clothes. She stayed there for 6 hours, waiting for darkness, then emerged, different dress, hair down, no braids, just another girl walking home from work. She passed German soldiers searching buildings. They didn't even look at her twice. German reprisals came swiftly, brutal, collective punishment, a tactic designed to turn the population against the resistance. The SS arrested 50 Dutch civilians at random, Men pulled from their homes in the middle of the night, women dragged from shops, anyone unlucky enough to be on the street when the trucks came. They were held in the Harlem jail, no charges, no trials. On December the 5th, 10 of them were taken to the town square, lined up against a wall, shot. Their bodies left on display for 3 days, a warning. Posted notices appeared throughout the city. For every German soldier killed, 10 Dutch citizens will die. The resistance will be crushed. Cooperation will be rewarded. Defiance will be punished. Gestapo raids intensified. Homes searched without warrants. Suspects interrogated, tortured, disappeared into camps in Germany or Poland. They were desperate to find the assassins. They searched for months. They found nothing. A Gestapo report from January 1945 stated, "We believe female operatives, possibly 2 or 3, are responsible for multiple assassinations of German personnel in the Harlem region." Description: age 15 to 25. Dutch appearance: often seen with bicycles, extremely dangerous. Approach with caution. Do not underestimate based on age or gender. The report was accurate, but it didn't help them. Liesel and Maren stayed ahead by being exactly what the Germans didn't expect. Not hardened criminals, not experienced soldiers, just girls. Ordinary girls doing extraordinary things. February 1945. The war was turning. Everyone knew it. Allied forces were advancing on all fronts. Germany was losing. The question wasn't if the occupation would end, but when. Days, weeks, maybe months, but the killing continued. The Gestapo became more desperate, more brutal, making final moves before the inevitable collapse. February 8, 1945, Amsterdam. Liesel was assigned to assassinate a Gestapo treasurer, Ernst Weber, the man who managed stolen funds, money confiscated from Jewish families, property seized from resistance members, a bureaucrat who enabled murder through accounting. Intelligence said Weber would be at a cafe in the Jordan district, eating lunch alone. Liesel took the train to Amsterdam, wore a coat her mother had altered. Different buttons, shorter hem, looking like someone else. She found Weber exactly where the intelligence said he'd be, reading a newspaper, eating soup, a briefcase on the floor beside his chair. Liesel approached. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Weber looked up, saw a girl, maybe 18, pretty, harmless. "No," he said. "Please." She sat, ordered coffee, started talking. She was visiting a sick aunt, but she'd gotten lost in the city. The streets were so confusing. Did he know Amsterdam well? Weber warmed to the conversation, started giving her directions, offering advice. 10 minutes later, Liesel said her aunt lived just a few blocks away, but she was still confused. Could he possibly walk with her, just to make sure she found the right building? Weber hesitated, then agreed. They left the cafe, turned down a side street, away from the crowds, but something was wrong. Weber's hand shot out, grabbed Liesel's arm, hard. His fingers dug into her flesh. "Who are you?" he said. Liesel's heart stopped. "I don't—" "You're one of them," Weber said. His voice was ice. "I can tell. I've questioned hundreds of you resistance whores. You all have the same look in your eyes." He called out, shouted for help. 2 German soldiers rounded the corner, running toward them. Liesel pulled her pistol, fired. The shot went wide, missed Weber completely, hit the brick wall behind him. He drew his own weapon. Liesel ran, sprinted down the street, her coat flying behind her, boots on cobblestones, heart hammering, the soldiers behind her, shouting, boots pounding, getting closer. She turned again, ducked into an alley, climbed a fence, dropped into a courtyard on the other side, found a basement door, unlocked. She slipped inside. Darkness, the smell of coal and mildew. She pressed herself against the wall, tried to control her breathing, tried to slow her heart. Heard the soldiers in the courtyard above, searching, calling to each other in German. She stayed absolutely still. 20 minutes passed, an hour, 2 hours, finally, silence. She waited until nightfall, then crept out, made her way to a safe house she knew, stayed there for 3 days before returning to Haarlem. The mission had failed. Ernst Weber was still alive. Liesl told Grayson what happened. "I should have been faster," she said. "I should have waited for a better moment. I should have seen he was suspicious." She sat in the potato shed where she'd first learned to shoot. 4 years ago, a lifetime ago. "I let the resistance down," she said. Grayson shook his head. "You're not a machine," he said. "You're human. Humans make mistakes. The important thing is you survived, you escaped. You can fight another day." But Liesl never forgot. She carried that failure for the rest of her life, the one who got away, the mission that didn't work. Decades later, when asked about her most difficult moment during the war, she didn't talk about the people she killed. She talked about Ernst Weber. "I failed," she said. "And failure meant he lived to hurt more people. That's what haunts me most." The psychological toll was immense. People think resistance fighters are heroes, brave, fearless, strong. The reality was different. Maren once said, "We were terrified every single day. We cried, we had nightmares. We questioned ourselves constantly. We wondered if what we were doing was right, if there was another way, if we were becoming the very thing we were fighting against." After the war, doctors would call it post-traumatic stress disorder, but the term didn't exist yet in 1945. They just called it surviving. Liesl described it years later in an interview. "You carry the faces of the people you killed. You remember every detail, what they were wearing, what they said, the expression in their eyes the moment before you pulled the trigger, how they fell, the sound they made." She paused. "It never leaves. Those faces are with you when you wake up, when you go to sleep, in quiet moments, in crowds, always there, always watching." Maren added, "We told ourselves we were fighting evil, and we were. The Nazis were monsters. They murdered millions. They deserved to die." Another pause, but that doesn't make killing easy. That doesn't make the guilt go away. Taking a life, even a life that deserves to be taken, changes you forever. Their mother's advice echoed through the years. Always stay human. They tried. They cried after every kill. Not always immediately, sometimes hours later, sometimes days, but always eventually. They refused to murder children, even when ordered, even when told those children would grow up to be Nazis themselves. "We draw the line there," Liesl said to Grayson once. "We'll kill soldiers, officers, collaborators, but not children, never children." Grayson didn't argue. They carried the weight of what they'd done. The Nazis killed millions, systematically, industrially, without remorse. They built factories for murder, turned genocide into an efficient process. They lost their humanity entirely. The Vaughan sisters never did. That's the difference. That's what Vivian meant when she said, "Always stay human." June 18th, 1944. Ros and Willem Bonenkamp were assigned to kill a corrupt police captain. William Rourke, a Dutchman who worked for the Gestapo, betrayed his own people for money and status. He'd personally arrested dozens of resistance members, turned them over to the Germans for interrogation, torture, execution. Ros and Bonenkamp found him on a street in Haarlem. Late evening, Rourke was coming home from dinner, well fed while his countrymen starved. Bonenkamp stepped out from an alley, raised his pistol. "This is for the people you murdered," he said. Fired. The shot hit Rourke in the chest, but it wasn't a kill shot. Rourke staggered, fell against a wall, reached for his own gun, managed to pull it, fired back wildly. The bullet hit Bonenkamp in the stomach. Bonenkamp fell, blood spreading across his shirt. Rourke tried to aim again, his hand shaking, blood pouring from his chest. Roz fired. 2 shots, both hit. Rourke collapsed, dead. But Bonekamp was down. Roz ran to him, tried to help him up. "Go," Bonekamp said, blood on his lips. "They'll be here any second. Go." "I can't leave you." "You have to." He pushed her away. "Run." Roz ran. Made it to a safe house 6 blocks away. Hid in the attic while German soldiers flooded the streets below. Bonekamp was captured. They took him to a hospital. He was dying. The bullet had torn through his intestines. Sepsis setting in. Hours left at most. The Nazis interrogated him anyway. A Gestapo officer sat beside his bed, asked questions, demanded names. Bonekamp refused to talk. His lips stayed sealed even as the morphine wore off, even as the pain became unbearable. He wouldn't betray his friends. Then the Germans tried a different approach. An SS officer came in, removed his uniform jacket, sat down beside Bonekamp. "I'm not Gestapo," the man said in Dutch. Perfect Dutch, no accent. "I'm Resistance, underground network. We heard you were captured. I'm here to help." Bonekamp looked at him through morphine-clouded eyes. "Help?" "Yes. We're planning a rescue, but I need to know who else is in danger. Who did you work with? Where are they hiding? So we can warn them, get them to safety before the Gestapo raids." Bonekamp was dying, delirious from blood loss and drugs, in agony. He wanted to believe. He gave up Roz's address, not her real address. Her parents' home, where she'd lived before going underground. "Rosalind Ashford," he whispered. "Number 12 Hofstraat. Tell her to run." The SS officer smiled. "We'll take care of it," he said. Bonekamp died 3 hours later. He never knew he'd been tricked. The Nazis raided Roz's parents' home the next morning. Her father was a schoolteacher, taught mathematics at the local secondary school, never involved in politics, never broke a law in his life. Her mother was a seamstress, made dresses for neighborhood women, quiet, kind, loved her garden. Neither had any involvement with the resistance. It didn't matter. They were arrested. Charged with harboring a fugitive, aiding the resistance, no evidence, no trial. They were sent to Ravensbrück, a women's concentration camp in Germany, her father to Sachsenhausen. Neither survived. Roz's mother died of typhus in October 1944. Her father was executed in December, shot for trying to escape. Roz learned about their deaths months later, after the war, when the camps were liberated and the records discovered. She never forgave herself. Roz went into complete hiding after Bonekamp's capture. She couldn't fight anymore, couldn't risk being seen. If she was captured, everyone she knew would die. Every member of the resistance cell, every person who'd helped her, every family who'd hidden her. So she vanished, lived in safe houses, attics, basements, root cellars, moved constantly, never stayed in one place more than a week. Couldn't see Liesel and Maren, too dangerous. Any contact could compromise them all. She lived in shadows for 9 months, waiting. The war was ending, everyone knew it. Allied forces were advancing across Europe. Germany was collapsing, liberation was coming, just a matter of time. March 21st, 1945. Roz was cycling through Haarlem, carrying copies of an illegal communist newspaper, De Waarheid, The Truth, and a pistol, just in case. She was stopped at a checkpoint. German soldiers and Dutch police, random stop. Bad luck, they searched her bag, found the newspapers, found the gun. She was arrested immediately. They took her to a prison in Amsterdam, held her in a cell, no windows, no light, except what came under the door, just stone walls and the sound of screaming from other prisoners. For weeks they interrogated her, beatings, sleep deprivation, solitary confinement, psychological torture. They knew they had captured someone important, but they needed her to confirm it. Roz admitted nothing, not her name, not her crimes, not her associates. She was prisoner 4721, nothing more. But eventually, they noticed something. Her hair was black, dyed poorly, the color was fading, and her roots were growing in. Red, bright red. They had found the girl with the red hair. The interrogation intensified. They showed her photographs, crime scenes, bodies of German soldiers, SS officers. "This is your work," they said. Roz said nothing. They beat her, broke her ribs, dislocated her shoulder. "Tell us who you worked with. Give us names. We'll show mercy." Roz said nothing. Days became weeks. Liberation was coming. Everyone in the prison knew it. The guards, the prisoners, even the Gestapo officers. The war was over. Germany had lost. But they kept interrogating her anyway. Finally, Roz admitted to the assassinations. "Yes," she said. "I killed them. German soldiers, SS officers, collaborators, all of them deserved to die." "Who helped you?" "No one. I worked alone." "That's impossible." Believe what you want. She never gave up a single name. Not Liesel, not Maren, not Grayson, not any member of the resistance. She protected her friends until the very end. The Germans debated what to do with her. Some wanted a public trial. Make an example. Show the Dutch population what happened to resistance fighters. Others wanted her dead immediately, before liberation came, before she could testify against them. One SS officer made the final decision. Obersturmführer Wilhelm Loggers. "This woman has killed German soldiers," he said. "She has defied the Reich. She admitted her crimes. She deserves no trial. Execute her." But there was a complication. By April 1945, there was an unofficial agreement between the Nazi occupation forces and the Dutch resistance. Both sides knew the war was ending. Both agreed to stop executions. A final gesture, a small mercy before the inevitable end. Most German commanders honored the agreement. Wilhelm Loggers did not. He wanted Rosalind Ashford dead. And he would have her. April 17th, 1945, 18 days before liberation. Rosalind Ashford was taken from her cell before dawn, the sky still dark, stars fading. Two Dutch collaborators served as executioners, Martin Schmidt and Martin Kuiper, men who'd chosen to serve the Reich instead of their own people, men who'd wear that shame for the rest of their short lives. They drove Roz to the dunes of Overveen, just outside Haarlem. Miles of sand hills and beach grass, beautiful in summer, desolate in April. This was where the Nazis brought resistance fighters to die. Hundreds had already been buried here. Mass graves, shallow, bodies stacked without ceremony or prayer. The van stopped. Schmidt pulled Roz out. Her hands were tied behind her back with rough rope that had rubbed her wrists raw. She'd been beaten during weeks of interrogation. Her face was bruised, swollen, one eye nearly closed, a cut on her lip that wouldn't heal, but she could still walk. They led her into the dunes, away from the road, where no one would hear the gunshots, where the sand would muffle everything. The sand was cold beneath her bare feet. They'd taken her shoes, her coat, left her in a thin prison dress. The sun was just starting to rise, pink light on the horizon. Her last sunrise. Schmidt forced her to her knees. The sand shifted beneath her. He stepped back, raised his pistol, a Luger. Standard issue, aimed at the back of her head. Roz closed her eyes, thought about her parents, her mother who taught her to sew, her father who taught her to read, both dead because of her. Thought about Sophia and Helen, her best friends. Dead because the Nazis couldn't tolerate anyone who stood up to them. Thought about Liesel and Maren, hoping they would survive, hoping they would see liberation, hoping someone would remember. Schmidt fired. The bullet grazed her skull, tore through skin and hair. Blood poured down her face, hot, sticky. But it didn't kill her. The shot had been off. Schmidt's hand had shaken. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe some part of him didn't want to do this. Roz fell forward, hands still tied, face in the sand, blood in her eyes, ringing in her ears. But she was alive. She pushed herself to her knees, spit out sand, blood running down her neck, looked up at her executioner, and said 5 words, clear, strong, no fear in them. "I shoot better than you," her voice carried across the dunes. A final defiance, a final fuck you to the Reich and everyone who served it. Schmidt's face went white. Kuiper stepped forward, raised his submachine gun. MP40, 32 rounds, fired a burst. The bullets hit center mass, chest, stomach, throat. Rosalind Ashford died in those dunes. She was 24 years old. She'd killed at least 12 Nazi soldiers and collaborators, maybe more. The exact number lost to history. She died 18 days before her country was liberated. 18 days. They buried her in a shallow grave, so shallow that when they shoveled sand over her body, her red hair was still visible, bright against the pale sand, a marker for anyone who came looking. 18 days later, May 5th, 1945, the Netherlands was liberated. Canadian troops entered from the north, British forces from the south. American units provided support and supplies. German forces surrendered. The occupation ended. People poured into the streets, dancing, crying, singing, waving Dutch flags that had been hidden in attics and basements for 5 years. Orange ribbons appeared everywhere, the color of the royal family, the color of freedom. Church bells rang, some for the first time since 1940. Strangers embraced, old women wept. Children who'd never known anything but occupation ran through the streets, shouting with joy. The nightmare was over. Liesel Vaughan stood in the crowd in Haarlem's Central Square. 19 years old now, watching the celebration. Maren stood beside her, 21, silent. They should have been celebrating too. They'd fought for this, killed for this, risked everything for this moment. But all Liesel could think about was Roz. 18 days. If the execution had been delayed just 18 days, Roz would have lived. Would have seen this, would have been here celebrating with them. 18 days. The cruelty of it made Liesel want to scream. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching people celebrate, feeling nothing. They found the bodies a week later. Allied forces investigating war crimes discovered the mass graves in the Overveen dunes, started exhuming, identifying, documenting 422 bodies, 421 men, 1 woman, Rosalind Ashford. They identified her by the red hair still visible above the sand, and by papers found in a Gestapo office in Amsterdam, prisoner 4721. Real name, Rosalind Ashford. Charge, murder of German personnel. Sentence, death. Executed April 17th, 1945. 18 days before liberation. The date on the execution order made headlines. The newspapers called it a war crime, an atrocity, murdering prisoners when the war was already lost. Wilhelm Loggers was arrested, charged, eventually convicted, but that came later. First came Roz's funeral. Queen Wilhelmina returned from exile in England specifically for the ceremony, wanted to honor the resistance, wanted to show that the Netherlands remembered its heroes. Ros was given a state funeral, full military honours despite never having been a soldier, Dutch flag draped over her coffin, carried by 6 resistance fighters, men who'd fought alongside her, survived when she didn't. 21 gun salute, the sound echoing across Haarlem, taps played by a military bugler. The mournful notes bringing tears to thousands of eyes. The Queen called Ros the symbol of the resistance, said she represented everyone who'd fought, everyone who'd sacrificed, everyone who'd died for freedom. Thousands came to pay their respects, lined the streets, threw flowers at the hearse. Ros was buried in a place of honor. A memorial garden created specifically for resistance fighters. A hero's burial. Liesel and Maren attended, stood in the back of the crowd, watched from a distance. No one asked them to speak. No one thanked them for their service. No one mentioned their names. They went home that night to their tiny apartment. Their mother made tea from real tea leaves. First time in 5 years. They sat at the small kitchen table. "Why Ros and not us?" Liesel asked. Vivian had no answer. The unfairness of survival, the randomness of death. There was no logic to it, no meaning. Ros had been captured at a checkpoint, random, bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. It could just as easily have been Liesel or Maren, but it wasn't, and they had to live with that. The weeks after liberation were chaotic. Trials began. Collaborators arrested, people who'd worked for the Nazis, who'd compiled lists, who'd betrayed their neighbors. Approximately 150,000 people were prosecuted for collaboration, 10% of them convicted, sentenced to prison, labor camps, some to death. Martin Schmidt was found guilty of war crimes, specifically the murder of resistance fighters in the Overveen dunes, executed by firing squad in 1949. 4 years after the war ended, Martin Kuiper met the same fate. Executed 1949. Wilhelm Loggers, the SS officer who ordered Ros's execution, was sentenced to death, but his sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. He spent the rest of his life in a Dutch prison, died in 1971, never showing remorse. Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Reichskommissar who'd overseen the entire occupation, was tried at Nuremberg, found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity, hanged in October 1946. Justice was slow. But it came. Liesel and Maren testified at some trials, gave evidence, described what they'd witnessed, what they'd done, but they didn't attend many. Too painful, too many memories, too many faces. And then came the silence, the forgetting. Liesel and Maren received nothing for their service. No medals, no recognition, no acknowledgement from the government they'd risked their lives to serve. Why? Because their mother was a communist. The Cold War began before World War II had even properly ended. The Soviet Union went from ally to enemy overnight, friend to threat in months. Anyone with communist ties was treated with suspicion, investigated, sidelined, forgotten. Vivienne Vaughan had been a member of the Communist Party since the 1920s. It was in her records, in government files, known to everyone. Her daughters were tainted by association. The Dutch government wanted to celebrate resistance heroes, but only the right kind of heroes, the acceptable ones, war heroes who supported democracy, who'd fought for freedom and capitalism, who fit the narrative of the new Cold War world. Liesel and Maren were the wrong kind of heroes, communist sympathizers, potential Soviet agents, people to be watched, not celebrated. The sisters who had risked their lives to save their country were now treated like potential enemies of that same country. The irony was not lost on them. They took different paths forward. Maren coped by creating art. She became a sculptor, worked with stone and bronze and metal, created memorials to the resistance, monuments to fallen fighters, statues of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Her work was powerful, raw, emotional, figures twisted in agony, faces frozen in silent screams, hands reaching upward toward a freedom they'd never reach. She wrote a memoir, a detailed account of their operations, the missions, the kills, the psychological toll, the price they'd paid. She titled it, "Always Stay Human." No publisher would touch it. Too political, too controversial, too communist. The manuscript sat in a drawer for 40 years, gathering dust, unread except by family. Maren spoke publicly when anyone would listen. Schools, community centers, small gatherings of veterans and activists. She kept the memory alive. But few people cared. Most wanted to forget the war, move on, build the future. They didn't want to dwell on the past, especially the uncomfortable parts, the moral complexity, the girls who'd become killers. Liesl chose a different path. "I coped by getting married and having babies," she said years later, a simple statement. But it held volumes. She met Jonathan Decker in 1947, a carpenter, quiet man, strong hands, kind eyes. He'd served in the Dutch government in exile in London during the war, came back when it ended. He knew about Liesl's past. Everyone in Haarlem knew. The stories had spread. But he didn't ask questions, didn't push, just accepted her as she was. They married in 1948. Small ceremony, just family, no celebration, just a simple exchange of vows. They had 3 children, Peter in 1949, Anna in 1951, Thomas in 1954. Liesl tried to build a normal life, raised her children, kept house, worked part-time jobs when money was tight, grocery stores, laundries, factory assembly lines. She never spoke about the war, not to her children, not to her neighbors, not to anyone who didn't already know. She tried to forget, tried to be just another mother, just another housewife, just another ordinary woman living an ordinary life. But the past never let her go. The nightmares came without warning. Liesl would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart racing like she'd been running, seeing faces in the darkness. The woman on the park bench, Marta Voss, looking up from her newspaper, the moment of recognition, the moment before the gunshot, the SS officer, Karl Hoffmann, handing her the book in the cafe, smiling, trusting, seconds before she led him to his death. The Gestapo agent, Hans Decker, asking for directions, never suspecting the girl with braided hair, never suspecting anything until it was too late. Every face, every detail, burned into her memory like photographs that couldn't fade. What they wore, what they said, the expression in their eyes, how they fell, the sounds they made, all of it, forever. Insomnia followed the nightmares. Liesl would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, counting the people she'd killed, or trying not to count them. Some nights she succeeded. Most nights she didn't. She never told anyone the exact number. Not her husband, not her children, not the historians who asked decades later. When asked, she always gave the same answer. One should not ask a soldier any of that. It became her standard response, her shield against questions she couldn't answer, wouldn't answer, because saying the number would make it too real, too concrete, too impossible to carry. Every year on May 4th, Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, Liesl woke with dread. The day before Liberation Day, the day the entire country honored its war dead. At 8 p.m., the whole nation stopped. 2 minutes of silence. Everyone, everywhere. Traffic stopped in the streets. Television and radio went silent. People stood wherever they were, heads bowed, remembering. Liesl always spent those 2 minutes thinking about Ros, 18 days. After the ceremony, she would drive to the cemetery, Overveen, where Ros was buried in the memorial garden. She'd bring red roses, always red, the color of Ros's hair, fresh flowers even when money was tight, even when it meant sacrificing something else. She'd stand at the grave for hours, silent, alone, remembering her friend. Her children never understood why their mother was so sad on May 4th, why she disappeared every year, why she came home with red eyes, why she wouldn't talk about it. She never told them, not until they were adults, not until decades had passed, when Liesl finally told her children they were grown. Peter was 30, Anna was 28, Thomas was 25. They sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd sat with her mother and sister after Roz's funeral. "I killed people during the war," Liesl said. No preamble, no softening. Peter looked shocked. "What?" "Nazis, collaborators, people who were sending others to death camps. I killed them." Anna started crying. "Mom, your grandmother was in the resistance. Your Aunt Maren too. We all were. We did what needed to be done." Thomas asked the question Liesl had been dreading. "How many?" Liesl looked at him for a long moment. "One should not ask a soldier any of that," she said. "But I'm your son." "Which is exactly why I won't tell you." She stood, walked to the window. Walked, looked out at the street where she'd once ridden her bicycle with a pistol in her pocket. "How do you tell your children that their mother killed people?" she said quietly. "How do you explain that to them? How do you help them understand that the woman who kissed their scraped knees and made their breakfast also put bullets in people's heads?" None of her children had an answer. Peter asked if she regretted it. Liesl turned from the window. "No," she said, "but I will never forget it. I see their faces every day. I hear the gunshots in my sleep. I carry the weight of every life I took." She paused. "But if I hadn't done it, more people would have died. Children would have been murdered. Families would have been destroyed. So no, I don't regret it." "Would you do it again?" Anna asked. "Yes," Liesl said without hesitation. "If I had to, if there was no other choice, yes." Maren suffered differently. She never married, never had children. Said the war had taken that possibility from her. "How can I bring children into a world that allowed the Holocaust?" she said once. "How can I create life when I've taken so much of it?" She devoted herself entirely to art and activism. Her sculptures were powerful, haunting. They appeared in small galleries, local exhibitions, never the major museums, never the national recognition. Too controversial, too political, too raw. She created a memorial to Roz, life-sized bronze statue, a young woman with flowing hair, holding a pistol in one hand, the other hand reaching upward, defiant, unbroken. She submitted it to the Harlem City Council for installation in the central square. They rejected it. Too controversial, too militant, too communist. "We appreciate the sentiment," the rejection letter said, "but we feel a more traditional memorial would be more appropriate." The statue sat in Maren's studio for 30 years, gathering dust, a monument to the forgotten. She gave lectures when invited, spoke to students about the resistance, about the price of fighting tyranny, about staying human in the face of evil. But her audiences were small, 10 people, 20, sometimes just 5. Interest was limited. Most people wanted to forget the war, build the future. They didn't want uncomfortable reminders of what it took to defeat the Nazis. They wanted to remember the heroes who fit the narrative, the acceptable resistance fighters, the ones who didn't make them question anything. Maren wasn't acceptable, so she was forgotten. The psychological toll never diminished with time. If anything, it grew worse. Survivor's guilt haunted both sisters. "Why did I live when so many others died?" Liesl asked in an interview when she was 75. "Why did Roz die 18 days before liberation and I survived for decades? There's no logic to it, no justice, no meaning." She paused, tears in her eyes. "I wish I knew why. I wish I could understand, but I can't. I never will." Maren said. We weren't special. We weren't braver than the others. We were just lucky. And luck is a terrible reason to survive when your friends didn't. They thought about Roz constantly, wondered what she would have done with her life, the law degree she never finished, the cases she would have argued, the justice she would have fought for in courtrooms instead of back alleys, the husband she might have married, the children she might have raised, the grandchildren she'd never meet, all of it stolen by a bullet in the sand dunes, 18 days before freedom, the waste of it, the senselessness of it, the brutal randomness of war. It never stopped hurting. For almost 70 years, Liesl and Maren waited. They lived ordinary lives, raised families, worked jobs, blended into Dutch society. No medals, no recognition, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Their story was known to a few historians, a few researchers, academic papers with limited circulation, but the Dutch government ignored them. The country celebrated other resistance heroes, organized ceremonies, built monuments, named streets, for men mostly, men without communist connections, men whose heroism didn't complicate the Cold War narrative. The Vaughan sisters were footnotes, afterthoughts, inconvenient truths best left unexamined, forgotten by the country they'd saved. Then, in 2007, everything changed. A Dutch filmmaker named Thera Coppens discovered their story while researching women in the resistance. She was 28 years old, granddaughter of a resistance fighter, fascinated by untold stories. She found a reference to the Vaughan sisters in an academic paper, just a footnote, a single sentence mentioning 2 teenage girls who conducted assassinations in Haarlem between 1943 and 1945. She started digging, found more references, archive records, Gestapo reports, witness statements, built a picture of what they'd done. Then she found them. Liesl was 81 years old, Maren was 83, both still living in Haarlem, in small apartments, on modest pensions. Coppens knocked on Liesl's door. "My name is Thera Coppens," she said. "I'm making a documentary about women in the resistance. I'd like to talk to you about what you did during the war." Liesl stood in the doorway, looked at this young woman, decided. "Come in," she said. It took 2 years to make the documentary, interviews with Liesl and Maren, tracking down records, finding witnesses who were still alive, visiting the sites where operations had taken place, the cafe where Liesl had met Hoffman, the park bench where she'd killed Marta Voss, the Overveen dunes where Roz had died. In 2009, the documentary aired on national television. 2 sisters in the resistance. For the first time, their story reached a wide audience. People were shocked. 2 teenage girls, assassinations, Nazi officers, decades of silence. The documentary showed everything: the training, the missions, the psychological toll, the forgotten heroes who'd been ignored because of politics. It became a sensation. Newspapers ran stories, television programs requested interviews, schools invited Liesl and Maren to speak. Suddenly, at ages 81 and 83, they were famous. Young people asked them questions. "Were you afraid?" "Every single day," Liesl said. "Did you feel guilty?" "Every single day," Maren said. "Would you do it again?" Liesl paused, thought about the question, about all the years, all the faces, all the weight. "Yes," she said, "because if I hadn't, more people would have died. Children, families, innocent people. If killing a few monsters saved hundreds of innocents, then yes, I would do it again." The documentary sparked a national conversation. Why had these women been ignored for so long? Why had the Netherlands forgotten them? The answer was uncomfortable. Politics, Cold War tensions, communist affiliations. The country had chosen to celebrate some heroes and forget others, not based on bravery or sacrifice, but on ideology. It was a truth the Netherlands didn't want to face, but it couldn't be ignored anymore. The evidence was there, in archives, in records. in the memories of two elderly women who'd been waiting 70 years for someone to say thank you. In 2014, the Dutch government finally acted. Prime Minister Mark Rutte personally invited Liesel and Maren to a ceremony at the Royal Palace in Amsterdam. Liesel was 88 years old, Maren was 90. Both walked with canes, both had trouble hearing, both had outlived most of their generation. But they were there. The Prime Minister presented them with the Mobilisation War Cross, a military honour for exceptional service during World War II. "You risked everything for your country," Rutte said. "You fought when others couldn't. You saved hundreds of lives, and your country forgot you. That was wrong, deeply wrong." He paused. "Today we say thank you, and we're sorry it took so long." Liesel's son, Peter, said later it was the happiest day of his mother's life. After 69 years, someone in authority finally acknowledged what they'd done, finally said thank you, finally gave them the recognition they deserved. Things changed after that. Streets in Haarlem were renamed: Vaughan Street, Ashford Avenue, memorial markers installed at significant locations. Their story was added to the national curriculum. Children learned about the teenage sisters who fought Nazis, about Roz, who died 18 days before freedom. Books were published, more documentaries made, academic papers written. In 2019, the Dutch government announced plans for a national memorial to female resistance fighters. Liesel, Maren, and Roz would be prominently featured. The memorial was scheduled to be completed in 2026, 81 years after the war ended. Better late than never, but still, 81 years. Maren died on June 18, 2016, 92 years old, heart failure, peaceful. At home, Liesel was there, holding her sister's hand. They didn't speak much at the end, didn't need to. A lifetime together, everything already said, but Maren's last words were important. "We did what needed to be done," she whispered, her voice weak, barely audible. "I know," Liesel said. "Always stay human." "I know," Maren smiled, closed her eyes, and was gone. Liesel lived 2 more years. She died on September the 5th, 2018. One day before her 93rd birthday, she was at home, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, 3 generations of family she'd helped create. Her last words were about Roz. "Tell her I'm sorry," Liesel said. "Sorry it took 18 days. Her daughter Anna held her hand. "Mum, Roz knows." "Tell her anyway." "I will. And tell her we stayed human, like we promised." Anna was crying now. "I will, Mum, I'll tell her." Liesel smiled, and then Liesel Vaughan closed her eyes for the last time. In the end, what did they leave behind? Numbers that can't be verified, estimates that vary wildly depending on the source. Some historians say Liesel and Maren killed 12 to 15 people each. Others say the number exceeded 20, possibly 30. Combined with Roz, the 3 of them are believed to have killed dozens of Nazis and Dutch collaborators. Some estimates say the number exceeded 100 when you include operations where they served as decoys but didn't pull the trigger themselves. But the sisters never confirmed anything, never gave a specific number. Liesel's standard response until the day she died: "One should not ask a soldier any of that." Maren once said, "We did what needed to be done. Nothing more, nothing less." The exact number doesn't matter. What matters is that people lived who otherwise would have died. What they left behind was more than numbers. They left a lesson about what it means to fight evil, to make impossible choices, to carry unbearable weight, about the price of doing what's right when no one is watching, when no one will thank you, when history might forget you entirely, about staying human in the face of inhumanity. Maren's final words: "When you have to make a decision, it must be the right one, and you must always remain human." Liesel's final message: given in her last interview before she died. Don't look away from injustice. Don't wait for someone else to act. If you see something wrong happening, you fix it, even if it costs you everything, even if no one ever knows, even if history forgets. You do what's right because it's right, not because you'll be rewarded. Their mother's lesson, passed down through blood and sacrifice, carried forward into new generations. Always stay human. Return to the beginning. Harlem, a public park bench, September 17th, 1943, 2:48 in the afternoon. Liesl Vaughn, 17 years old, approaches a woman reading a newspaper. "What's your name?" Marta Voss. The pistol, the gunshot, the body falling. Pages scattering in the breeze. Liesl gets on her bicycle, rides away, past German soldiers, past Dutch police, past crowds gathering. No one suspects her. No one stops her. 70 years later, in an interview shortly before her death, Liesl described that moment. "I still see her face," she said. "I remember what she was wearing, a dark blue dress, wire-rimmed glasses, how she looked at me when I asked her name, the moment she realized what was about to happen. The sound of the gunshot echoing across the park. I remember everything." "Do you regret it?" Liesl shook her head, slowly. "No, but I will never forget it. Her face is with me always, just like all the others." "Why did you do it?" "Because if I hadn't, 200 people would have died. Jewish families, children, people who'd done nothing wrong except exist." Marta Voss was going to hand their names to the Gestapo. I stopped her. "Was it worth it, the psychological cost? The nightmares, the guilt?" Liesl was quiet for a long moment, looking at something beyond the camera, beyond the interviewer, beyond the present moment. "You carry the weight," she finally said. "Every day, every night. The faces never leave. The guilt never goes away. You wonder if you could have done it differently, if there was another way, if you became a monster while fighting monsters." She paused. "But yes, it was worth it, because those 200 people lived. They had children, grandchildren, lives that wouldn't have existed if I'd done nothing, if I'd looked away, if I'd let someone else take responsibility." Another pause. "That's the weight of being human, of staying human, of remaining human even while you're doing inhuman things. You don't lose yourself. You don't become what you're fighting against. You carry the weight, you bear the cost, but you stay human. And that's what makes the difference." Liesl Vaughn, Maren Vaughn, Rosalind Ashford. 3 women who became killers to save lives, who were forgotten by their country for 70 years, who carried the weight of their actions until their final days. They weren't perfect heroes. They cried. They had nightmares. They questioned themselves constantly. They were human. That's what made them heroes. Not their kills, not their bravery, not their sacrifice, but the fact that despite everything, they stayed human. They never lost themselves, never became the evil they fought, never stopped caring about the cost. They stayed human. Always. Today, if you visit Harlem, you can walk down Vaughan Street, past Ashford Avenue, through Morrison Park, named after their mother Vivian, who taught them to help others. In the central square stands a memorial, completed in 2026, 81 years after the war ended. 3 bronze statues, 2 young women standing side by side, sisters, one with braided hair falling over her shoulder, one slightly taller, protective stance, both looking forward, determined, unafraid. The 3rd statue stands slightly apart, a young woman with flowing hair captured mid-movement, as if blown by wind. One hand holds a pistol, the other reaches upward, defiant. Together but separate, united in purpose, different in fate. The plaque reads, Liesl Vaughn, 1926 to 2018, Maren Vaughn, 1924 to 2016, Rosalind Ashford, 1920 to 1945. The Angels of Harlem, who fought in darkness so others could live in light. 1940 to 1945. Never forget. Every year on May 4th, Remembrance Day, people gather at the memorial, leave flowers, red roses mostly, for Roz. The 2 minutes of silence at 8 p.m., the entire nation stops, remembers, and in Harlem at the memorial hundreds stand with heads bowed, remembering 3 women who stayed human while fighting monsters. Today, a young girl stands before the 3 bronze statues. She's 12 years old, school uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder, brown hair pulled into a ponytail. Her class is on a field trip, learning about the war, about the resistance, about the price of freedom. Her teacher had told them the story that morning, about the teenage girls who killed Nazis, who saved hundreds of lives, who were forgotten for 70 years because of politics and ideology. The girl reads the plaque, traces the letters with her finger. Liesl Vaughan, Maren Vaughan, Rosalind Ashford. She tries to imagine what it must have been like to be 14 years old, riding a bicycle, carrying a gun hidden in your coat, choosing to kill so others could live. She can't imagine it. Her life is so different, safe, peaceful. The war is history, something in textbooks, something her great-grandparents might have experienced but seems impossibly distant. She pulls a red rose from her backpack. Her mother had bought it this morning when she mentioned the field trip. "Leave it at the memorial," her mother had said, "for the girl with the red hair. She deserves to be remembered." The girl places the rose at the base of the statue, at Roz's feet. She stands there for a moment. Looking up at the bronze faces, they look so young, younger than her older sister, just girls. But they'd done things she couldn't imagine, carried burdens she'd never understand. Behind her, her teacher calls. The class is moving on, other sites to visit, other stories to learn. The girl turns, runs to catch up with her classmates. Behind her, the statues stand watch. 3 women, frozen in bronze, forever young, forever defiant, forever remembered. The red rose lies at their feet, one of thousands left there over the years, for Liesl, for Maren, for Roz, for all the ghosts who fought in darkness, so that children like this girl could stand in the light, safe, free, unafraid, never forgetting, never forgotten. The wind moves through the square, rustles the flowers left at the memorial, carries the scent of roses. The statues don't move, don't speak, don't need to. Their presence is enough, a reminder of what was sacrificed, what was endured, what was never forgotten despite 70 years of trying. A reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that teenagers can be heroes, that staying human is sometimes the hardest fight of all. A reminder carved in bronze and stone. 3 women who killed dozens, 3 women who saved hundreds, 3 women who paid the price in nightmares and guilt and survivor's guilt that never faded. 3 women who, despite everything, stayed human, always. In the Overveen dunes where Roz died, there's another memorial, smaller, more personal, a simple stone marker. Rosalind Ashford, 1920 to 1945. "I shoot better than you," her final words, defiant to the end. Every year on April the 17th, the anniversary of her execution, people gather there, leave red roses, stand in silence, remember the girl who died 18 days before freedom. The waste of it, the tragedy of it, the brutal unfairness of timing, but also the courage of it, the defiance of it, the humanity of it. Roz died protecting her friends, refused to give up names even under torture, chose death over betrayal. She died human, and that matters. This story was hidden for 70 years, buried beneath politics and ideology and the inconvenient complexity of history. Forgotten because the heroes didn't fit the narrative, because they were women in a man's war, because they were communists in a capitalist peace. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It emerges, eventually, when someone cares enough to dig, when someone refuses to let the forgotten stay forgotten. Liesl Vaughan was 14 years old when she joined the resistance, 17 when she killed her first target. She lived to be 92, carried those faces for 75 years, every single one, every detail, every moment, never forgetting, never forgiving herself, never stopping, because some things are worth killing for and some things are worth dying for. And knowing the difference between the two is what it means to stay human. One should not ask a soldier any of that. But I'll tell you this, we did what needed to be done. We cried every time. We carried the weight every day. We stayed human while fighting monsters. And in the end, that's all that matters. That's the only thing that matters. We stayed human, always.